This is an ode to the second place finishers, the grid fillers, the also-rans, the failed experiments, and the copycats. For every legendary winning race car in the history of motorsports, there was a full field of competitors behind it. Some winning designs past their prime, some which never lived up to the expectation, and some which never had it to begin with. It's these cars, these ho-hum passerbys of engineering, which fill the large majority of history's grid. In looking back, we're so often focused on the tip of the spear, it's easy to look past how eclectic it really was. For every Lotus 49, there were Cooper T81s. For every 917, a T70. That's why I like this car. The March 701. Truthfully, this car, or at least what it's representing, was far from a failure. In fact, it had its time on the top step. But it represents the average, the safe option, the guarantee. It was built to the rules, trying very little that was new. Something that would be proven to work and work well. An economic, safe bet, if you will. The March 701 was the first Grand Prix car from the then brand new March F1 team. A super team of sorts. It was the formation of ex-drivers Alan Rees and Max Mosley, the business-minded Graham Coker, and ex-McLaren engineer Robin Hurd. Hurd and Wright penned the designs in 1969 for a team they planned to build around star driver Jochen Rindt. The 701 embodied March's philosophy of design. And although at the last second, Rindt opted to stay with Chapman's Team Lotus, a decision which would be the definition of blessing and curse. The 701 did succeed in attracting the eyes of several would-be F1 teams as a customer car. The headlines had been dominated by another startup, featuring reigning world champion Jackie Stewart and team boss Ken Tyrrell. Tyrrell had perhaps the most highly anticipated effort in recent years, splitting from Matra and announcing a partnership with Ford. The Tyrrell team would either be a great success or a colossal failure. But one thing was certain, the eyes of the racing world were transfixed upon them. It wasn't publicly known at the time, but the decision for Tyrrell to purchase some March chassis was done as a stopgap. Ken Tyrrell fully anticipated building a chassis of his own. However, the development time for such a car was long, and with the new season fast approaching, they had no choice but to buy an off-the-shelf car until their own was finished. So March Engineering went into 1970, their first Formula One season, with their own two-car team, the two-car team of Tyrrell, and a growing list of private entrants, including one, Andy Granatelli, with an Italian-American driver known as Mario Andretti. When the green flag fell on the first Grand Prix of 1970 in South Africa, there were no less than 5 marches to take the flag. A success by any measure. Tyrrell did eventually develop their own chassis, dubbed the 001. But not before collecting 4 podiums and a win, with Jackie Stewart behind the wheel, second time out in Spain. This alongside 2 non-championship Grand Prix wins, 3 podiums by the March team themselves, and 1 additional podium for the aforementioned Andretti was quite the record for a safe bet. In ways, it was painfully average, but it got the job done. 150 pounds overweight, basic wing design. Interesting but unproven concepts for side pod aero. Nothing special in the brake department, but a rock-steady DFV, and most important of all, a palatable price tag. So, much like the ambitious nature of the team themselves, RaceSim Studio have created what could only be called the pinnacle of vintage car creations for Assetto Corsa. And although they call it the Formula RSS 1970, it's clear what the inspiration was. The feature list is long, with 7 modeled aero packages, animated adjustable wings, custom driver animations for throttle, brake, clutch, and visor movement, animated fuel lines, custom gauges, and specially recorded sounds from a real DFV. A shiny list of never-before-seen additions, and enough to capture the attention of most Assetto Corsa diehards. RSS is a well-known studio for high-quality cars, but this is the first truly vintage car they've brought to a sim. And although some of the special features will no doubt bring a smile to your face, it's the driving which makes this car the perfectly average representation of a time period truly special. So, lined up on the grid at Kyalami, first time out is a full field of 701s to duel with for 10 laps to see and talk about how fantastic it is to be average. Alright, so here we are towards the back of the grid. Lights are lit. Out. We're underway. Try to control some of the wheel spin off the line, sneak up the inside here. So everybody checks up and we'll come over the top of the hill and down the wide front stretch at Kyalami. One of the widest tracks in racing for a long time, but just before the 3 marker, hop on the brakes for the first corner, down to second gear, too wide, keep it nice and tidy here, cold tires, cold brakes. Dance the car on the exit, you'll see a lot of that, up to third gear, just baby it through the second corner. I think I snuck up the inside of another car. All right, flat out now through this left-hander. Right before the 2 marker, down to third. Want to paint the line on the right side here towards the inside. Car in front runs wide. Suspiciously Lotus looking 701 there. Right, down to second gear, down to first for Clubhouse. Maybe grab second on most laps here, but the tires are cold. And as you can see, we're sliding all over the place. And it's one of the great features of this mod is how different the tires are. On the opening lap, as you can see, I run wide there. If you've come from a qualifying session or hot lapping and then jump into a race, you'll be very surprised by the lack of grip until you get the tires warmed up. And run onto the front straightaway. Through the little kink here, not much of a corner in these cars, especially with how wide this track is. And across the line, complete lap number 1 up to P8. Got Hubert in front of me. Hubert Hane. Alright, jump down the gears right before the 3 marker. Don't want to outbrake yourself at Kyalami. It's one of the easiest things to do. Missed the apex to the inside there a little bit, but we'll run the wide line. So this mod comes with a full field of painted cars that make them look somewhat like the other cars from the 1970 season. And there are a few other models floating around out there, and you could assemble yourself a grid, but they're plenty of fun to race, kind of as a spec series. I originally thought I might try to assemble a 70 grid, but it's too much fun this way. So that's where we have the Lotus 72 looking gold leaf Lotus 701. We've got a couple McLarens up front, it looks like. But as a spec car, as a representative from the 1970 F1 season, I think this car fits the bill so well, and it's kind of my point in talking about it being the average. It's not a special car like the Lotus 49 was or like the Lotus 72 was. It's just another DFV formula car, but it has all the right parts that made it successful enough. And it's so wonderful to drive because it's not doing anything bad, anything that you wouldn't want a car to do. Right, down to second gear for the first corner. We try to pull in Hana here. I've got the AI set to 100%. It's one of my perennial complaints with Assetto Corsas that the AI aren't always the fastest, but on 100% they're just about the right speed here at Kyalami. We'll pull in Hana here as we come up to Sunset. Third gear on the inside. Drivers always talked about how difficult a lot of the most famous cars in racing were to drive. The Lotus 49 comes to mind. Jim Clark, Graham Hill. We'll jump to the inside, coming into the S's. Down to second gear here. Don't want to hit the curb too hard. Bounce off of it. Hana sticks to the inside. Here we go. Over, under. Get into the third gear this time. Try not to bog down too much. Coming onto the front straightaway. He shoots it out wide, though. It's an opening radius corner there. Keeps it interesting. So we'll try to get this slipstream down the front straightaway. See if I can slip around the outside. 7 laps to go. It's going to go by real quick. I'll try not to outbrake myself, but really stab the brakes. You can see the rotors lighting up inside the front wheels. Oh, and he sticks it in there. Alright, we use that curb a little bit to keep the car on the track. So you see the brake rotors light up. And it's gonna sound odd, but the brakes might be my favorite part about this mod. Everything is clicking for me. Everything's doing it for me. Is a little slow there. We'll try to talk and duel him at the same time. Everything about this is great, but the brakes, the brake feel in this mod is unlike anything I've ever driven in Assetto Corsa. When this first came out, it's been out for a couple months now, I want to say. When it first came out, a lot of folks covered it or highlighted it, and I wasn't thinking of doing one of my own, because what else could I say about this car? But the more I drive it, I keep coming back to it for one. Oh, he locked it up there. Up the inside, we almost locked wheels. The rare mistake, realistic mistake there from the AI. Slip in front of Hane. It's going to try to get me back here in the slipstream though. Try to jump to the inside, block the inside line. We should be able to outbrake him for the first corner. Just trying to outbrake ourselves. But the more I drive this car, the more I really just love the feel and the progression of it over a race. It feels different every lap. At the start of the run, you've actually got pretty good brakes once you brake for the first couple of times, but they start to fade as they get really hot, and you can't brake quite as late as you would, especially if you're running full fuel or something. Then the tires come in, and I've been running mostly with these treaded tires. It does come with slicks as well, which bring a whole different aspect to it, but I think the extra slidiness that it has with the treaded tires here is very nice. It just feels so much like you would expect a car from this time period to feel. A little bit of downforce, but still a very animated suspension and chassis movement and roll. But you have that little extra downforce where you're starting to go a lot faster mid-corner, and you can really put the hammer down on the DFV. Never mind the sounds, just listen to this thing. They recorded special sounds just for this mod, and I fully believe it. I have a feeling, whether it's authorized or not, these sounds are going to end up in a lot of other stuff in Assetto Corsa, because the DFV obviously is such a prolific engine in racing. It pretty much was 1970s racing. And it sounds unlike I've ever heard it in this car. DFV, of course, changed a lot throughout all the years. Added compression, all the little tweaks to eke out a little more horsepower. 1970 here is really starting to come into its own. Certainly not the engine that Lotus debuted with at Zandvoort in 1967. Pulling in the next car in front, and I think it's a BRM looking car. It's, of course, a 701. But it seems this forgotten decade of the 1970s is finally starting to get quite a lot of recognition in sim racing. Talked about it before, but there always has been a lot of content from the 90s and newer, because that's when sims really came about. And then there happens to be a lot of content in the 1960s, so I think that's that decade that everybody thinks about when you think of classic racing. But the 70s, for the longest time, were forgotten. But not anymore. We've got this 1970 F1 car. Of course, got some 1970 tracks like Spa and the Nürburgring coming to Automobilista 2. And the 1970 Formula 1 mod for Grand Prix Legends is not so far off either. In front runs a little bit wide. Having to put in the work here to try to catch him. That Lotus looking car behind me is sticking on me, so I gotta be careful not to make a mistake here. Slide the car a little bit there. You want to try to be as smooth as possible with this, and in watching some videos, interviews from the time period, the movie F1 Champions, I think it's called. I'll put the name in the description, but movie that follows the Tyrrell team through, I believe, the 73 season with Francois Severe, Jackie Stewart. They talk a lot about how smooth you have to be as a race driver to be fast. It seems like smooth was what a good race driver was in this time period, and it's absolutely true with this car. You got to be very careful with the throttle, sitting at half throttle for a lot of the corner just to get it to turn and not over-rotate, but not understeer off. You don't want to be juggling the steering about and throwing the weight of the car around so much. So close in now on the car in front. It's all about being smooth. It really is a poetry. Oh, he runs a bit wide. There we go, up the inside. Short shift there into third. Should have rung it out. Just kissed the curb on the inside. See if I can do the same thing I did with Hane. Get down to second gear. He's not going to blow the corner in the same way, but still runs a bit wide. Keep it tight on the inside. All right, right in the slipstream then. So come through the kink. I think just a couple laps to go. Oh, nowhere to go. He gets me the inside, though. I didn't really want to make a pass there. All right, 2 laps to go. I think up to P6. Side-by-side will work down the front straightaway. Dips in behind. All right, nice on the accelerator then. With all the great stuff coming out for some of the other sims these days, Automobilista 2 specifically comes to mind. I haven't been in Assetto Corsa quite as much as I was maybe a year ago, but something like this just reminds you of how good it can be, and trust me when I say that this is unlike any of the cars I've driven before. Just in the feel, the depth of it. There's a lot of extra trickery going on with this. The custom shaders patch is required, not for graphical reasons only, but for some of the physics calculations and things. It's really pushing Assetto Corsa beyond what it was designed to do, but it's so good. So we'll come up and start the final lap. It's so good. It makes me really want this quality of driving in other sims. I hate to say anything negative about Automobilista 2 because it's had such a tough time the past couple of years as I blow the first corner a little bit. It's really come a long way, and it's very good now. But I wish the early Grand Prix cars felt like this one did in that sim. They're still not quite as reactive and snappy and realistic feeling as this is. And so to complement some of those awesome circuits we're getting, I really hope that those teams can look at something like this and say, wow, this is what we can do in a simulator for a early 70s Aero Grand Prix car. Because it's really nice. Alright, we'll come through the final real corner at Kyalami here, so certainly not winning the race. The AI have gotten the best of me, but I think finishing just inside the points here in the 701, but I think I'm going to take it out for another spin right after this because it's just so good. So of course the 701 was a good Grand Prix car. I think winning a Grand Prix immediately qualifies you in that position. But it certainly wasn't a great Grand Prix car. It wasn't a car that went on to win championships. It's not the car that's on the front of books and histories about the sport. It's a car that was only around for a season and change, and a car in how Race Sim Studio has brought it to life perfectly captures this time period. For anybody out there that has a Assetto Corsa, don't let the moderate price tag fool you. I think this car is absolutely worth the $4.49 that they're selling it for. If you've tried other historic Grand Prix cars like the Lotus 49, the Ferrari 312, and maybe came away with thinking, wow, this is really hard, give the 701, give the Formula 70 RSS car a try. Because what a driver's car it really is. So I hope there's more of this to come in the future, that RSS and other mod teams go out and make all kinds of cars from history. But that's it for this one. So thank you for watching. This has been GP Laps, and I'll see y'all again next time.